So hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and today we're talking romance novels. I am a big fan of romance novels, as if you are not a first time watcher, I'm sure you will all know. I'm a big fan of Regency romance in particular, so that is what this video is all about. This is basically a beginner's guide to Regency romance. If you have never tried the genre or you don't know where to start, or if you have dabbled and you don't know where to go from where you started, this is your guide on how to fall in love with Regency romance. So in terms of how this format will go, I want to quickly talk about why I love it so much. What are the main things that I'm looking for in a Regency romance novel? What I think are essential key values to have in these novels. And then I'm going to go on to recommending my favourites and also kind of like touching on the most popular authors in the genre. Okay guys, so let's get cracking in terms of what I like most about Regency romance. So I first started reading Regency romance a while ago. I kind of originally would look at the book covers and think, what the hell are these hot messes? You know, the covers are just really cringeworthy. They all look the same. And I was like, nah, not into it, not touching these. But then for some reason, I started getting into historical fiction. So I'm a big historical fiction fan anyway. I will probably make one of these videos all about historical fiction recommendations if you are a beginner to the genre. But I kind of got suckered in through the historical fiction route. So I started reading a lot of historical fiction with like more of a romance plot. And then I got recommended my first author, who I'll talk about later on in depth, but I got recommended Kleypas, who is one of the biggest authors in the genre. And I first started reading her WALLFLOWER series. And the first book is called Secrets of a Summer Night. And you know what, I read it and I was like, this is pretty damn good. But after that, for some reason, I stopped reading it. Probably went back to my YA fantasy, which is like my fail-safe genre of all time. However, I realized that what I really liked about the genre and kind of what inspired me to go back were the escapist elements to it. And one of my favorite things about the genre is how you are swept away with a love story, but often it's because you're in a different time. Early 1800s in England. And that era is kind of defined by a strong set of like manners and how to behave in society. A lot of the things you'll find in Regency romance is a situation where our main character, often a woman, is kind of destitute or needs to marry for money or needs that kind of security. And sometimes she might be under some pressure to marry the wrong person because she needs that security of marriage. Often in these novels, and what I love the most is they all end up marrying the people that they love. And I think that is one of the more unrealistic parts of Regency romance, in that a lot of women didn't end up marrying for love. However, that is the best thing about these novels, is a situation will start off and they will usually dislike this love interest or the man that they end up marrying, and then they fall in love with them. And I really enjoy, some of my favourite tropes of the genre are either the arranged marriage situations where, you know, through some reason our protagonist has to end up marrying this person that they might not immediately like, and then they grow to love them. I also love the trope of like a really kind of rebellious rake. Now a rake I will go into on what that means and kind of, you know, what that means in the genre, because rakes are very common in Regency romance. But often they fall in love with a rake and they've got a very bad reputation, and then our main character ends up falling in love with them, love, all that stuff. So yeah, some of the kind of main things that will crop up in the genre are rakes, who are basically men who have very bad reputations for sleeping around and getting in trouble with women, and they basically are notorious for kind of leaving women out to dry, in that sense, where they will basically steal their virtue and never marry them. Rakes will crop up a lot, as you will see from some of the titles that I'm going to read out to you in my recommended section. Rakes are very common. Another thing that's very common in Regency romance are wallflowers. So wallflowers are basically women who never get asked to dance in a ball, and they basically stay to the wall. So they are on the outskirts of the ball, just watching people dance, not getting asked to dance themselves. And basically they are often paired with the rakes. So you will find that a lot of rakes will, like, you know, try and pursue some of the wallflowers. This sounds very, very bizarre, like explaining all this, but those are kind of some of the main values that I love. And what I think is very misconstrued about Regency romance is that it's very anti-feminist, or it's not feminist at all, or that these women can't think for themselves, don't have personalities, just fall in love and that's it. I think a lot of that kind of is misrepresented as a like romance genre in general, is that it's all about the love story. Don't get me wrong, it is about the love story, but all of these novels I am about to recommend to you have feisty, brilliant characters, and the women in these stories often are kind of like leaders of their time. Like, obviously these are all fictional, but these women are inventors, they are doctors, they are writers. Like, I think one thing that the Regency romance genre is doing really well is showing that a lot of the women in these stories, yes, they fall in love, yes, they want their happy ending, but they are strong women in their own right. And I love that about the genre. I also think those are the books that I like the best in the genre. And I think there must be some exclusions to what I've said. Of course, there will be traditional Regency romances where the women are more pliable, they are more vapid, and they don't really have anything like much of a character behind them or much building. But all of these stories that I'm going to recommend to you by these authors all have characters who are badass, who are intelligent, who are hilarious and quirky, and I love every one of them. So I hope that's given you kind of like an introduction to Regency romance, why I love it. I mean, ultimately, I do enjoy the love story, but it is the journey to the love story that I love the most. And all of these novels do that really well. So, drum roll, here are my beginner's picks for if you want to get into Regency romance. So my first author, who I will recommend to anyone wanting to get into the genre, is Lisa Kleypas. I love this woman, I love her books, I will read anything she writes. So I have read 3 of her book series so far. I've read, so obviously I mentioned at the start of this video, I read the WALLFLOWER series, which started off with Secrets of a Summer Night. That book introduces us to a group of friends. Each of the novels in the WALLFLOWER series takes on each of the women in this group of friends and basically show them falling in love with different people in the books. The thing I love most about Lisa's novels is the kind of like really tight-knit groups of friends, families, and you really get to know all of the characters really well. You end up loving the characters so well because you end up knowing them throughout the series of books. And for example, the characters of Secrets of a Summer Night, the first book in the WALLFLOWER series, will pop up in the second book and the third book in that series. So that's what I love most about Lisa Kleypas. I just want to also say, guys, like the characters in Lisa Kleypas's novels are intelligent, they are hilarious. Like the banter between the main character and the love interests, 10 out of 10. I think the banter in general in Regency romance is what I look for above all else. Like I love a good banter between the heroine and the hero, love it. So I would recommend the WALLFLOWER series by Lisa Kleypas. I'm currently reading the Regency series by Lisa Kleypas. I have just downloaded the final book in the series, which came out in February. I've not read that yet, so dying to read that. The first book in the Regency series is Cold-Hearted Rake. And that basically features a series of basically a family called the Regencys. And it takes each of the family in turn and sees them fall in love with different people. And then also the Hathaways series, which is also another kind of like family, where you will kind of, each novel in the series will go through a different member of the family, who they fall in love with, all that stuff. So absolutely love Lisa Kleypas. Like some of her novels, I would say some of the novels in these series are just like my favourite novels of all time. I also love how Lisa Kleypas weaves in the actual historical setting so well. There is a lot of history in these, which I really like as a big history buff. And because this is more I must also say that even though I'm classifying this as Regency romance, I think Lisa Kleypas is set in the Victorian era. So not Regency, but a lot of people misconstrue it as Regency romance. But I'm just being pedantic because I'm kind of including it in the Regency banner here. But it is technically Victorian romance. Anyway, I love how Lisa Kleypas weaves in the kind of Industrial Revolution of the Victorian era. She talks about kind of like the move towards capitalism. So for example, one of our heroes in the book owns a department store, and there is just a lot of like historical backing to this. I think there is so much meat to each of her novels that they're just like worth a read, in my opinion, every time. Okay, we're moving on to my second favourite author in this genre, Tessa Dare. So you might know of Tessa Dare. I've also been watching Reagan or Peruse Project's videos lately, and she's just discovered Tessa Dare, and just kind of watching her videos of her discovering Tessa Dare just reminded me like how good an author Tessa Dare is, because she will really change your opinion on Regency romance. So the main series that I've read that a lot of people love is called the Girl Meets Duke series. And Girl Meets Duke starts off with the Duchess deal. This book is kind of a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. They kind of don't like each other at first, and the hero is kind of scarred from the war. So he is the Beast figure, and he's very, very jaded. He's very unhappy with his life. And then our main character swoops in and kind of like makes his life a lot happier. They end up falling in love. It's great. The second book in the series is called The Governess Game. This was my favourite novel of the whole series. And then the third book, which had just come out, I think it was last year, is called The Wallflower Wager. And then there's also going to be a fourth book, which comes out, I think, next year. Either way, I adore Tessa Dare. The thing I love most about Tessa Dare is the humour. It's a really, really funny book series. She writes with such humour and warmth, and also all her characters are so quirky. So in The Governess Game, for example, her character who is a governess and ends up falling for the master of the house, she's really into like astronomy and kind of science, which I absolutely loved. And then in The Wallflower Wager, our main character is obsessed with animals, and she like has this kind of like weird zoo in her house, and like these kind of like animals that she rescues and cares for and kind of like heals in a way, and basically recuperates all these animals. And she's just so quirky and so lovable that you just like, oh God, it's just so brilliant. So that's what I love about Tessa Dare. Her characters are so brilliant and really lovable. And also they're quite like saucy as well, but in a like a good way. Like I must say, Lisa Kleypas is quite sexy as well, as is Tessa Dare. Obviously it's Regency romance, there's gonna be some like saucy scenes, but I would say both authors do them really well. They're not cringy, they're not like too much, they're just like the perfect amount of like steaminess. And then the third author I want to recommend, I must just say though, I've read only one book of hers, but I fell in love with it completely, is Sarah Maclean. So Sarah Maclean is, again, with Lisa Kleypas and Tessa Dare, one of the most beloved authors in the genre. So her most famous series is The Rules of Scoundrels, which I've read the first book of that, called A Rogue by Any Other Name. That book was phenomenal. There was so much into it. There was so much kind of intrigue, and I loved the relationship dynamic between the main character and our love interest. And then she also has another series called Love by Numbers, and that is a whole different series, but I've heard loads of people fall in love with that series. And then quickly going on to others in the genre who I've either read one book of or I want to read more of. I have just finished a novel called His Scandalous Lessons by Katrina Kendrick. And that was so brilliant. It basically follows a main character who is the Prime Minister's daughter, and she basically falls in love with his rival, so the leader of his opposing party. So there's kind of like politics, there's a really great dynamic. I must say it isn't as funny as Tessa Dare or Lisa Kleypas. That's the only thing it's missing, but the romance is great, the storytelling is great, the characterization, fab. And there is a nice amount of banter as well. So I really would recommend that one by Katrina Kendrick. And then another author who I've seen great things about but haven't read is Julia Quinn. So Julia Quinn is another master of this genre that I haven't read yet, but I will very soon. But I just wanted to recommend her to you in case there is kind of like you've already read the others and you want to read someone else. Julia Quinn, her Bridgertons, I think it's called, her Bridgertons series is extremely popular, and I actually think there is a Netflix series coming or something like that. It's coming onto a major platform like Netflix very soon. So I'm going to try and read those books before it comes onto our screens soon. And finally, guys, this isn't technically like a part of the Regency romance genre, but I just wanted to mention an author called Abigail Reynolds, who I think I read her books like way before I even read Lisa Kleypas. But her novels that I love are the Pride and Prejudice variations. Now, the Pride and Prejudice variations are essentially Pride and Prejudice fan fiction. Hold on a minute though, because they are obviously published novels, and because Pride and Prejudice is out of copyright, you can write retellings and stuff like that on it. Basically what this is reimaginings of Pride and Prejudice. So, you know, what if Elizabeth had said yes to Mr. Darcy during his first proposal? Who knows what would happen? Like, you know, it kind of like explores different angles, different avenues that the book could have gone down, and it basically finishes the novel. And let me just say, these are steamy, but like in such a good way, kind of like in the way that Pride and Prejudice leaves you hanging. Like, of course, Pride and Prejudice was written at the time in the Regency era, so there obviously aren't any like sexy scenes in Pride and Prejudice. It is very kind of like model of its time. If you're kind of looking for a bit of spice with your Pride and Prejudice, definitely read Abigail Reynolds. I also should say, like, even though I've described it as fan fiction, it is more than that. Like, it's so political, it's extremely well researched and very accurate of the Regency era. So very well researched, and you can actually imagine Jane Austen. Like, it's very kind of in Jane Austen's voice, and it's written in the kind of tone that they would have written in the Regency era. So it's almost like it could be written by Jane Austen, and that's why I love them so much. So my favourite novels in this series are The Last Man in the World and Impulse and Initiative. Leave links down below if you want to check them out, but those two are the ones I gave 5 out of 5 stars to. They were incredible, and I might have to reread them because I can't remember what happens, but I remember loving them. So guys, that is it for my beginner's guide to Regency romance. I hope you really enjoyed this video and found it helpful. And if this is the start of your Regency romance reading, I hope you really enjoy it, and do let me know down in the comments what you have read first or what you're going to read next. I would love to know. Let's just open up the discussion on Regency romance down in the comments. So if you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing and give it a thumbs up. And I will leave all links of the books described down in the description box. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.